With the best brand of football in Idaho, this is the 8-Man Prepcast on IdahoSports.com.
That's right. Welcome into another edition of the Idaho 8-Man Prepcast on IdahoSports.com. Brandon Baney is always joined by Will Hoenike. Will, what's going on?
Not much. Just living the dream. Yourself?
Yeah, the same. Getting ready for football season. We kind of had a soft opening last week for some of the bigger schools in week 0. And
yeah, I was going to say, getting ready. You've already done a game, haven't you?
Yeah, I was up in Missoula for the Rigby Coeur d'Alene game last week, which was awesome. You know, those 5A schools can really bring it. But of course, we love talking about the 8-man game as well, which is what we do every week here on the Idaho 8-Man Prepcast. A couple of different ways you can get this each week. Audio only at IdahoSports.com. Across the top of the homepage, there's a tab that says Prepcasts with a little drop-down menu. You click on Idaho 8-Man Prepcast and you rock and roll from there. You can also download this podcast wherever you download your podcasts, Google, Apple, Spotify, Stitcher, etc. Video version of this Prepcast is also available each week on the IdahoSports.com YouTube channel as well as our Facebook page. So I thought we could just kind of go conference by conference and kind of just give a couple of thoughts on how these league races will shape up this year. And then we can kind of look at the schedule of opening games on the 8-man slate this weekend as well. So let's start at the 1A D1 level, Will. To me, there's more intrigue at the D1 level, whereas in D2, you have a really dominant returning state champion in Kendrick. So at the D1 level, to me, it's pretty wide open. A good bet, though, would be that somebody from District 4 will be in the mix because that conference is always so difficult. And Oakley is the 2-time defending champion coming from that district as well.
Yeah, it's a very good conference. Oakley's got a lot of talented players back. Bryce Sevier, Ethan Torbaugh, you just kind of go up and down the line there. They've got a lot of good players coming back, but Raft River has good players coming back. You know, enter Cary. Cary has a lot of good players coming back. Murtaugh. I think Murtaugh has one of the most kind of unknown quantities in Junior Benitez. He's a really good, I don't know what his final stat line was last year, but it seemed like every time I was hearing about him, did you see he had 230 yards and 4 touchdowns last week? Every time I was hearing his name, it was because he was putting up some monster numbers. Now, Murtaugh has to replace some pretty good football players that are no longer on that team, but they're going to be a factor in there as well. And with the way 1A D1 goes with 5 automatic qualifiers, or actually it might be 4 automatic qualifiers now since there's technically not a District 1 league anymore. And then you've got the at-large teams. There's going to be some good representation at large from that District 4. And there's also the possibility that a pretty good team in District 4 might get kind of knocked down because they're having to play Raft River, Cary, Oakley, just up and down that list. And they might take some lumps based on that. And, I don't want to say it's going to cost them because I think the better the competition you play, the better the team you are. But it might overshadow maybe how good a team potentially is just because they're playing some of the best teams in the state on a weekly basis.
Yeah, so we asked every coach to kind of give us their preseason prediction on how the league would shake out, and we did these preseason conference coaches polls, and you can see all of them on our site, IdahoSports.com. It's on the homepage. We did it for every league, 5A all the way down to 1A D2. In this district, the Snake River Conference, Oakley was picked first. And then, to me, kind of interesting, Lighthouse Christian was picked second in the preseason coaches poll. Raft River was third, Cary 4, Valley 5, Murtaugh 6, and Glens Ferry 7. I see 7 really good teams, and beyond Oakley being kind of the consensus because they've earned it as the 2-time defending champ. I don't know. You could slot 2 through 7 just about anyway.
You can pull a lot of those teams out of a hat, frankly, and Lighthouse Christian – I'm not going to say they won't finish second. The thing that they might do a little differently is I think a lot of 8-man football teams in Idaho, they're kind of run first teams that can throw. I get the impression Lighthouse wants to drop back and wing it around a little bit. They have some incredible athletes on the outside. They've got tremendous speed. They want to spread things out. They want to utilize that speed. And that can make for tough matchups. If you're not used to covering 4 wides or 3 wides, kind of a vertical attack, if you will, getting down the field. If you're not used to covering it, it's really hard to simulate in practice, which can make it tough on a Friday night. So Lighthouse Christian, they're going to be a tough matchup. They're going to be a tough team. And if they can fill in and if they can adapt quickly to head coach Jason Smith and his new system, they're going to be a tough team. And they're absolutely going to be one of those teams they're going to be competing for a spot.
Yeah, they've got so many good athletes at Lighthouse Christian. I got to see them at the 1A D1 state basketball tournament last year. And then during track and field season, Walker Gettle really came onto my radar because he put up some very impressive times in the 1, 2, and 400 meter sprints.
Yeah. They've got a ton of speed. And the one thing that I actually joked with Coach Smith about is they open, and I might get the order wrong, so don't hold this against me, but they open with Grace, who was a playoff team. And then they go in some order of Cary, Butte County, Raft River, Oakley. Now, anywhere between 5-0 and 0-5, are you going to be shocked? Because those are all good football teams. None of those teams are a joke. And so, Lighthouse Christian may be 2-3, and they might be the best 2-3 team in the state of Idaho.
Definitely. And like we said, we'll have to see how the rest of that league shakes out. Of course, Raft River lost a lot to graduation, including some really talented linemen. Cary is making the jump from D2 to D1. We think they're going to be just fine, though. Valley is making the jump the other way from 2A to 1A D1. But they're a young team. They've got, some on-the-job learning to do this year. And then Murtaugh and Glens Ferry, I think, are also wild cards. So league.
Wild cards is a good way to put them. Glens Ferry last year, they weren't physically, they weren't huge. They didn't have a bunch of 250-pound, steamrollers. But what they had is they had a lot of good athletes. And I think Murtaugh kind of falls in that same category on any given Friday. If the matchup is right, if the situation is right, hey, they're going to be in a lot of football games this year, and they're going to have a chance to have a say in this.
Definitely. Glens Ferry played in the 8-man classic last year, and one of our IdahoSports.com broadcasters, Logan Green, fell in love with them. He was really impressed by, even though they lost that game and they kind of struggled through the season, he kept telling me every week, hey, it's one of these weeks, it's going to come together for Glens Ferry. He could see the pieces in place. And so I didn't get to personally see Glens Ferry last year, but I know Logan did, and he was really impressed with what he saw. So
yeah, one of their top players from last year, Justice Schrader, transferred to Lighthouse Christian of all schools. We're just talking about them, so that's gonna impact them a little bit. But they've got some kids that can play football and can make plays. And I think anybody that overlooks on them, I think Logan's right. I think they are going to be capable of jumping up and biting someone who isn't paying attention.
Definitely. Well, in terms of 1A D1 football, the other big league everyone always has to talk about is the White Pine League. Oh man, there's some fun football up north on the Camas Prairie in the White Pine League. All the games always seem to be 60-50 and just shootouts on offense. And so here's how the preseason poll looked for the White Pine League. And again, I think you could slot these 8 teams in pretty much any order and be somewhat correct. Lapway, the preseason favorite. Prairie, number 2, Kamei 3, Clearwater Valley 4, Genesee 5, Logos 6, Potlatch 7, Troy 8. Let's start at the top with Lapway. Has been getting a lot of buzz because they got to the semifinals last year. They brought back some really explosive pieces from that team last year, and I was ready to buy into the hype, but then all of a sudden I find out that Lapway has to drop out of the 8-man classic. And what I was told was that it was over a concern of low numbers. And again, I don't know if that's low numbers for the program or low numbers for that first game, because maybe they weren't going to have enough kids get their 10 practices in. But that made me just pause for a moment. But there's no denying that Lapway has some incredibly talented athletes.
Well, the thing that made me pause with Lapway is finding out that Sage Lone Bear won't be playing for Lapway this year. He has made the decision to transfer to Clarkston to get into the 11-man game. And, he's a special talent. He's a big athlete, and big athletes are hard to come by in the 8-man game. So they're definitely going to miss him. But I think they got one of the state's best players in terms of football in Mason Brown. That kid had a phenomenal year last year when he was basically sharing the stage with Titus Yearout, who was the 1A Division I State Player of the Year. And they've got some other good players. Terrell Ellenwood Jones, they've got him back. They've got Elias Yearout. So they've got plenty of weapons, and that's the one thing we've talked about on this podcast before. The one thing Lapwai always has is they have good athletes, and you cannot go in there and not see a good athlete somewhere. You're going to see good athletes, and I think Mason Brown's one of the best, and I think he's one of the best in the state. And I think that young man by himself has a chance to keep them in games and win some games. I think I would probably still lean Prairie by a whisker as that number one team in the White Pine, but I think you could go 1 through 5 and almost pull them out of a hat, put them in any order, and I don't know that I'd be completely confounded with the outcome. I like what Kamei has. I like what Clearwater Valley has. Logos, Jack Driscoll coming back as quarterback. They're not going to be shy about throwing it around. Potlatch has a little bit of rebuilding to do. They lost a lot of production off of last year's team, and Troy likewise. They've got some work to do. Those two teams, I think, have the farthest to go, but that's why you strap it up, and that's why you play the game. It seems like every year there's somebody like, oh man, I didn't really see that one coming. Maybe it's one of those two teams.
Yeah, and Genesee, brings back Angus Jordan, but they did lose a lot of the guys that he was getting the ball to. So
Cy Wareham, that was a big loss. That kid, I don't know, and I know he got various all leagues and all states and whatnot, but when it came to talking about some of the top players in 1A Division I football last year, how many times did you see it last year? It was 3rd and 15, and I swear to God, I think that the play call was throw it up and have Cy go get it on 1, ready, break, and they did it. And they did it. They were able to execute it. He was a tremendous player, and him and Jack Johnson being gone both really hurt Genesee. But at the same time, Angus Jordan's a heck of a player, and they've got some other good players coming back as well. And they'll compete. They'll be in the mix. They will have a chance to have their voice heard.
For sure. And then, Clearwater Valley last year had the potential. They had such a gauntlet to start the year. They played in the 8-man classic, and then they had to play Prairie right away the next week. And it just, the White Pine is tough, right? There's no easy games, but it seemed like CV was really stacked towards the front end of their schedule, and they just never could get that momentum going. We'll see if they can attack the schedule a little better out of the gates this time. Coach Alan Hutchins always does a great job there. Let's talk about District 3, the Western Idaho Conference. We mentioned it a little bit last week, where Notice is kind of the overwhelming favorite, and the question is, can they get to the playoffs and make some noise on a statewide level? Because it's just something that District 3 hasn't been able to do. So the preseason poll is Notice 1, Idaho City 2, Wilder 3, Rimrock 4, and Greenleaf Friends 5.
I'd say that's a pretty safe pick. That's a pretty easy pick. I like what Jason Rober has going at Idaho City. Joe Woodland at Notice, who wouldn't like, to be bringing what he's bringing back. He's got to make a change at quarterback, but, he unfortunately got a little bit of a jump started in the playoffs last year when his starter got hurt, and Guevara had to come in and play the rest of that game. So he got that taste last year, and now he kind of slides into that starter's role, and you still have Carter Woodland. You still have all those nice players on defense. They're going to be a tough team to handle, and I like Idaho City. I think that they're going to be a team that, you want to talk about a program that takes on kind of their leader's persona. If you know Jason Rober, he's a fairly, unassuming guy. He's a pretty simple guy, but he grinds, man. He grinds and he works, and his teams reflect that. They're not going to be super flashy. They're not going to be full of trick plays and spice and dash and all that stuff. What they're going to do is they're going to line up, and they're just going to keep grinding you down the field. And they've got a slew of running backs, and they're going to put the ball in their hands, and they're going to rely on that offensive line to create some holes, push their way down the field, and they're going to be a tough team to beat. And Wilder, Kyle Dalsolio he's got a nice thing going there. It's going to be interesting to see when they get the team on the field, because they have graded out in terms of graduation some of the best players in District 3 over the last 3 or 4 years. And, it's going to be interesting to see this year, are they continuing to bring in some of the best young players, because they've had some success in the past doing that. Let's see if they can do it again.
And, I'll say Rimrock is always a tough place to go play. They're always a physical team. Sam Ward in his second year as coach at Rimrock, he's from Montana originally. And then, Greenleaf Friends, they're kind of like hitting the reset button. They're really starting over, where their coach is actually from Gem State, Jeremy Perkins. It's kind of a combo between Gem State and Greenleaf. He said, I'll be honest, I didn't really have much to do with the team last year because Tyler Hoagland was the coach, and he was in the Greenleaf building, and there wasn't that many Gem State kids playing. So it's pretty much all new players to me. We'll see what I can't even tell you what kind of offense and defense we're going to run yet, because we got to figure out who we've got and what we can work with. So they're kind of a hard reset, but it'll be interesting to watch their development throughout the course of the season as well.
Yeah, for both those teams, I think depth is going to be that's going to be objective number one. Is they're going to have to plug the holes and then work on filling that second layer. I think both teams have some good football players. Aiden Akiso down at Rimrock is a good football player. They've had some good players over the years too. It's just, it's just how many, and can you keep those players healthy, and can you keep them on the field, and can you keep them producing? And Rimrock is that one team that always seem to be, just kind of right there, maybe that one win away from breaking through. And maybe this is the year they get that win. Who knows? We'll have to see, because they're pretty consistently in that 3-win, 4-win category where, okay, now let's go beat Notice and really announce that we're here. You know what I mean? I'm using that as an example. And they've got it. They've got a shot. But I think that realistically, and I think that Coach Horn would say this too. Hey, we've got to go prove it. We can say all we want. We've got to get it done on the field. And, teams, Notice has gotten it done on the field. Wilder in the past has gotten it done on the field. Idaho City in the past has gotten it done on the field. Can Rimrock get into that fight, so to speak, and land some punches? And if they can, there's an opportunity for them to work their way up the standings and be in position to play football in November.
Definitely. I know this is a football podcast, but I had a quick basketball story that was so cool. I broadcasted the 1A D1 state tournament last year, and I got to see Rimrock make it. I called up their coach, and I said, hey, when was the last time you guys went to state? He goes, I'm honestly not sure. I asked around the school, and nobody was sure. It's like our first or second time maybe ever. And then, they lost their first game, but then they were playing in a loser-out game against their district rivals from Liberty Charter, and they got a win, and it was, I believe, their first win ever at state in boys basketball, and the celebration was so awesome to see, and everybody representing Rimrock was there. The stands were packed with green clad fans, and so it was really cool to see that from Rimrock at basketball last year. So
yeah, their girls basketball program had a run in the early 2000s where they were one of the dominant programs. I mean, they were winning games every night, 58-12, 64-19. They were drubbing everybody. And then they were going to state and they were making some noise. But the boys program, like you said, they hadn't quite achieved that level. It was nice to see them. It's fun to see at the state tournament, be it football, be it basketball, be it whatever sport you want, that team that hasn't been there in a while. It's really fun to watch those teams and just see the excitement. When Clearwater Valley made the state football playoffs a couple of years ago for the first time in like 20 years, just the buzz in the community. I thought that's always one of my favorite things.
Definitely. So talking about schools that have thin margins of error in terms of depth and bench players, let's swing the other way to a school that never seems to have that problem, and that's Butte County over in District 5 and 6. They are so loaded with good quality players every year. No surprise they were picked as the preseason favorite in the High Desert Conference, followed by Grace, and then Chalice was picked third. The interesting wrinkle here is Chalice and Mackey are forming a co-op. It still hasn't been officially approved, but I don't see why it wouldn't. I think they're probably going to get the green light on this and play as a co-op. They will play Chalice's schedule. How do you see this conference shaking out? Butte County, the runaway favorite?
Looking here, they're going to have to hurry and get that thing approved because they're supposed to play Friday night against Castleford.
Yeah,
so,
and maybe it has, and I just haven't heard yet.
Yeah, that's entirely possible. No, I think it's. I think in my mind, it's pretty clear to see that Butte County is one. Trayton Allen's a kid that I think that could be in the running for 1A Player of the Year, assuming he's getting the ball 20 times a game. He's just a fantastic running back, and the offense that they run over there is conducive to what he does. So as long as he's getting the ball, he should get his numbers, and he'll be in the mix for All-State, State Player of the Year, all that stuff. Grace has a really dynamic player. Dallin Draper is a fantastic player in his own accord. He was the Defensive Player of the Year in his league last year, in that league. Really good player. He'll be back. Grace, I think, has a chance defensively to be pretty good. And it's when you're talking about 1A football, pretty good might be holding a team under 30 points. Just give your offense a chance to win it. You're not going to have a whole lot of, Pittsburgh Steelers Iron Curtain defenses that are shutting everybody out. That just isn't going to happen in the 8-man game. So if Grace's defense can, say give up 18 to 24 points a game, they're going to win a lot of football games. They're going to scrape together enough points on offense and do enough damage on offense where, as long as they're not having to score 46, 48 a game to win, they'll win some football games. And then Chalice Mackey, both teams had numbers concerns. I think the number that I saw was last year, the two programs competed separately. They each had 14 players and each graduated half of those kids. It's hard to replace 7 kids off a 14-man roster in one season. So there's going to be a learning curve when you're introducing some new players, especially somewhat late in the process here. It's not like they went to football camps together. They didn't do spring workouts together. They'll practice together and they'll work hard. They always scrap. They always play hard. They grind. They're going to get better. But it might take them a few weeks to find their stride because they'll be learning how to play together. So I think Butte County, the 1, Grace, the 2, Chalice Mackey, the 3, I think is a pretty reasonable expectation of how that conference will play out.
Yep. And Butte County has one of my favorite players just because of his name, Rebel Beard.
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
And he's a good punter. He could really.
He is. Yeah.
He's a stud. All right. So we are doing the media polls again this year where various media members around the state vote each week. I am the representative for IdahoSports.com. I'll tell you how my top 5 went. Last week was the first week of the polls, and since there were no 8-man games, nothing changed in my top 5. So I had Oakley, number 1, Butte County, number 2, Prairie, number 3, Raft River, 4, and Cary, 5. That's my top 5. Will, what do you think?
I like the 1 and the 2. I think 3 through about 8. I think those are going to have to play out a little bit. And there are teams, I think Lapway is going to be in there. I think Kamei could be in there. I certainly think Grace could probably play their way in there. Notice could play their way in there. So I think from 3 on down, it might just be an eye of the beholder thing. But I think that I would put Oakley and Butte County in the top 2 spots as well.
All right, let's move on to 1A D2. Let's start in the White Pine League. That's where Kendrick resides, and they are kind of the overwhelming favorite coming into the season, only because they're the defending champions. They lost 1 player, period, off of last year's team, and they looked pretty dominant at times. The rest of the league, in terms of the preseason coaches poll, behind Kendrick, it's Lewis County 2nd, Deary 3rd, and Timberline 4th. And honestly, between those 3 other teams, I don't know who gets that second bid to the playoffs. It could be pretty competitive between all 3.
I think Lewis County has the best player in Ty Hambley coming back, a run-first quarterback who doubles as a linebacker. And, Chris Carter was famously the former NFL receiver. One of his coaches says all he does is catch touchdowns. Well, all Ty Hambley does is make plays. That's all he does. He's a really, really good football player. So I would give Lewis County the edge for that number 2 seed based on Ty's presence, his presence there. Now, Kendrick, 1 player. Now, it was a good player, Mason Anderson, but that was they had 1 senior on last year's team, and they won the state championship. I think that their week one, and we'll come back to this a little bit later, but their week one, or their game this weekend against Notice in that 8-man classic, I think that that's going to be a really good first game for them, because the games that they struggled in last year, Genesee beat them, Oakley beat them. So your 1A Division I teams gave them a few problems. And the fact that Notice is going to line up and they're going to go hat on hat and they're going to bang you around a little bit. And let's see how Kendrick handles that. I think they absolutely 300% have the talent to handle it. They have the ability to handle it. I think there's a good chance they will handle it, but I think that's the way you're going to have to beat Kendrick. You're not going to outskill them. They're too good. They're too good. You're going to have to be able to wear them down. You're going to have to be able to win at the line of scrimmage, and you're going to have to be able to control the clock, because if the game is played in Kendrick's style and in Kendrick's tempo, Kendrick is going to win, and they're probably going to win going away.
Yeah, spoiler alert, Kendrick was my number one team in the media ballot I cast, which is not
pretty
surprising.
Easy pick. My opinion, pretty easy pick, yes.
Yeah, for sure. I'll get to the rest of the top five in just a little bit. Let's stay up north. District 1, the North Star Conference, got a little bigger now. It's a 5-team league. You've got incumbents Mullen St. Regis, Clark Fork, and Kootenai, along with a couple of D1 drop-downs in Lakeside and Wallace. Here's how the preseason poll went according to the coaches. Mullen St. Regis was picked 1. Then it was Clark Fork 2, Wallace 3, Lakeside 4, Kootenai 5.
I think the two best players in the league, I think you have Caleb Ball at Mullen St. Regis. I think, if I'm not mistaken, he's going to his 4th year as the starting quarterback there. And you have Vander Brown at Lakeside, who's just a touchdown waiting to happen. Clark Fork has some questions. They graduated 4 pretty good seniors last year, including Carter Sanroman, a kid who made a lot of plays there for a lot of years. They've got to fill his shoes. They've got some kids that can do it, but now they've got to go do it. Wallace, to me, is the interesting team. Landon Streeter ran for 1,500 yards last year as the quarterback. You've got Parker Goldade, one of his playmakers, on the outside. They're going to be able to make some things happen. And head coach Jared Young really liked the way his team came on down the stretch last year, and they played their way into the 1A Division I playoffs. Now, they had to play Oakley in the first round, didn't go, or in the opening round, I should say, didn't go especially well for them, but they made it. And now, once you whet that appetite a little bit, maybe it's enough to get a few extra kids in the weight room over the summer and get a few more kids signed up for camp and get a couple more kids to turn out once fall comes around. So they're a wild card team for me. And the thing that I'm really happy about for them is a change in the bracket, where for years, the North Star, basically ever since the North Star and the White Pines separated, so 3-4 years ago, whatever it was, they got one bid. And that one bid every year that they've had it has been Mullen St. Regis, and Mullen St. Regis has deserved it. But there have been some years that Clark Fork has deserved it too. Let's be honest. But they didn't get it because there wasn't a second bid coming out of that conference. Now there is. So if Mullen runs out and goes 8-0, and you're a 6-2 Wallace, or you're a 6-2 Kootenai, or whoever it is, you're not just sitting there saying, well, that was fun. Let's get ready for basketball. You still got something to play for. And I think there are a couple of pretty good teams up there that if they get into a state tournament setting, into a playoff setting, if the matchup is right, they have a chance to maybe make some waves.
Yeah, real monkey's paw dilemma with Clark Fork. Hey, you finally get that second bid to the playoffs, but now you've got to get through Lakeside and Wallace and all these newcomers. So good luck. Right. Yep, for sure. Let's jump down to the Long Pin Conference, District 3. People seem to forget that Horseshoe Bend was really good last year. Man, they're getting like no preseason buzz, no preseason hype. I really like Horseshoe Bend. They were picked 2nd in the preseason coaches poll behind Council. So it's Council 1, Horseshoe Bend 2, Garden Valley 3, Tri-Valley 4, Meadows Valley and Salmon River tied for 5th, and then Cascade 7. To me, there's kind of a clear dividing line. The top 3, all pretty good, all probably should make the playoffs, and then the next 4 are still kind of building their program up numbers-wise.
See, I think Tri-Valley has a chance to join that top group. I think there is a little bit of a separation there. Meadows Valley is still, metaphorically speaking, they're still learning how to play. It's year 2 of the program. And I think that they'll be much more competitive this year, if for no other reason than their kids are all a year older, a year bigger, and a year more experienced. Salmon River, they've got experience because they only lost one or two seniors off of last year's team. They just don't have a whole lot of depth. And then Cascade, we gotta see the engine start moving a little bit. But we don't know what they have. We don't know how many kids they have. We don't know what it's going to look like. So we're all going to find that out together. But you get up at the top. I think Tri-Valley has a chance. I think you could make an argument that next year their window really opens up. But they've got juniors on this year's team that it's their third year starting. They've got seniors that it's their fourth year starting. So they're still a relatively young team. But it's an experienced young team, and for head coach Justin Mink, that's obviously a great thing. But I think you've got a good argument that the top three, I think your best players in the conference reside in those top three spots. Tacoma Kelly at Garden Valley, who everybody's kind of earmarking as the third. There are a lot of coaches saying, keep your eye on that guy. He's going to be a big problem this year. I think Horseshoe Bend maybe, in some people's eyes, get knocked down a peg because Colton Meyer isn't there anymore. But guess what? Blaine Meyer is. So is Kalen Jones. They've still got plenty of playmakers there. And then Council, they did lose Trinity Hoxie, which is going to hurt him a little bit. He was a good football player. But Wyatt Vining is a kid that I've had a couple of coaches tell me, that's a kid, if he wants to play college football someday, he will probably have that opportunity. And Council, they've had some success in sending guys to college. JT Mahon playing some college football at one point. Matt Paradis, who went on to play he's in the NFL right now. So they've had a little bit of success in that regard. So those top three teams and Tri-Valley on the edge. Tri-Valley's not going to be a team you can just kind of dismiss and pat them on the head and say, go sit at the little kids table. They're going to fight for a spot at the big kids table, but it's a crowded table. It's a pretty good top of the Long Pen Conference. Definitely.
And I see a similar division as we move one district over to District 4 in the Sawtooth Central Conference. The preseason coaches poll it was a tie for first. Camas County and Castleford got an equal number of votes, so they tied for first. Dietrich was third, Hanson 4, Hagerman 5, Shoshone 6. To me, again, it's pretty clear the top three are all going to be pretty good, and then there's maybe a bit of a gap, and then I think Hanson maybe could challenge, but Hagerman, of course, first time they're competing as a member of the conference in a couple of years, and Shoshone is a D1 drop down, but historically the last couple of years they've also had problems with numbers.
I was a little surprised because in my mind, when I was thinking, and I've been doing a lot of research helping with the football statewide previews, when I'm trying to find a team that I think, 8 versus 8, a team that can go up there and compete with Kendrick in a one-game setting, one of the first teams that came to mind for me was Dietrich. And I don't mean that disparagingly to Castleford or to Camas County at all, but Cody Power and Peyton Snedden, that's a pretty good 1-2 right there. That not every team in the classification is going to be able to emulate. So I think Dietrich is probably the team to beat in that league, albeit Castleford is certainly not far behind with Ethan Rowland coming back among others. And then Camas County, they lost a couple pretty big ponies off that team last year. A lot of good players coming back, and then obviously having a little success in the playoffs is going to help push them forward a little bit. A lot the same as what happened with Wallace up north. But Dawson Kramer is going to be a big, big loss for them, and they're going to have to find somebody to replace not only his physical traits, but his leadership ability and his ability to just get behind the pads and knock some people back. So, I would think in my mind, it would be Dietrich and Castleford with Camas maybe a half step behind, and then you start getting into, okay, who's going to bubble up from the bottom? Who's that team from that quote-unquote second tier that's going to make a challenge? Is it going to be Hanson? Is it going to be Shoshone? Shoshone won 5 games last year playing their hybrid JV and varsity schedule, so they got a taste of victory. The question is the pieces. They lost a lot of players, and one of them that Shoshone lost, Hudson Lucero, pretty good running back / defensive end, went to Dietrich. Shoshone and Dietrich are, they're practically overlapping on houses in subdivisions. Those towns are so dang close. So they lost Hudson Lucero. So who steps in and starts taking some of those carries that a lot of people probably assumed that Lucero was going to wind up getting for Shoshone, except now he'll be down the road in Dietrich.
Yep. It'll be fascinating to watch that. Last year, that league was really, there were 4 or 5 teams duking it out every week, and Camas County, of course, made the playoffs and had the ultimate first round knockout when they took out North Gem. And Speaking of North Gem, we'll go to the Rocky Mountain Conference, districts 5 and 6. What was a 4-team conference has shrunk down to 3 now. Clark County will be playing, but not an official league schedule. They're going to be kind of a hybrid varsity JV schedule again, or for the first time. We talked about that last week. Rockland was picked 1, Water Springs 2, North Gem picked 3. And you're thinking, boy, North Gem, they've kind of ruled the conference the last couple of years. They were picked last, and I think head coach Corey Hatch is okay with that, because he can say, look, nobody believes in us, and we're going to go out and prove to everybody once again that we're the toughest.
They have to replace Bridger Hatch. And it's when you lose a kid that, put up 8 gajillion yards and about 8 bazillion touchdowns last year, when you have to replace him, and he's off to play college football back east. So, that's a heck of a football player that Corey Hatch is going to have to replace. And the thing that he says, and he's very unabashed about it, we're going to do what we do. And, we're going to keep running the football. And if nobody stops us, we're just going to keep right on doing it. And until you stop us, we're going to keep running the football. We're going to keep scoring touchdowns, and we're going to keep winning games. I think Water Springs with Drew Plocker, who is one of the more underrated players in especially Division II, but just 8-man football in general. I think they're going to be a tough team. But, Rockland is another one of those teams. That's probably the other one along with Dietrich. If it turns into a one-on-one stare down between Kendrick and Rockland, could Rockland play with them? And, Brigham Perman coming back after missing most of last season injured is going to be a big, big boost for Rockland. And Gavin Perman throwing the ball, and then Teague Matthews, you're talking about a kid who's a junior in Rockland, Idaho, who's already getting some feelers from Division I college football programs. I mean, that's amazing. You talk about the Cy Wareham effect when we were talking D1. Hey, it's 3rd and 15. And here's the thing. Everybody in the field's going to know, the primary receiver is going to be Teague Matthews. We got to have our eyes on Teague Matthews. But knowing it's going to him and stopping him, 2 wildly different things. And Gavin Perman, the quarterback there at Rockland, is one of the one of the kids who could be deemed as a passer. I think there are a lot of quarterbacks that at the 8-man level that are exceptional runners and exceptional athletes who can pass, but aren't necessarily passers. I think Rockland has a system that allows them to develop a little bit more in terms of passers. And I think Gavin Perman's a guy that's going to be able to put up some serious crooked numbers, pardon the baseball analogy, throwing the ball down the field, because he's going to have some targets between Brigham Perman, Teague Matthews, and any number of other Bulldogs in Rockland.
Yeah, and I know people are thinking, but boy, the Permans, there's been a lot of good Permans over the years. Well, guess what? There's get used to that for like the next 20 years. There's going to be more Permans coming. It's a big family over there. So,
yeah, and they're all cousins, and then there's like 6 more of them on the way. And that's one of the fun things about small school football is those legacy kids. Like, oh, I remember his uncle, I remember his dad, I remember his older brother, and in Rockland, it's hard to forget him because half of them were just on the team last year. You know what I mean? They've got 2 on this. 2 or 3 on the team this year, including an incoming freshman, and then another a cousin who's not a Perman, but he's a Woodworth.
Yeah,
and that's the linebacker Cody Woodworth, who's a very good football player in his own right.
Yeah, I did an interview with Titus Yearout after Lapway won the 1A D1 basketball championship last year, and I said, now you're handing the torch off to Elias, your younger brother, and he said he's just the start of it. He goes, I've got like 7 or 8 younger siblings, so and it's boys and girls, so there's going to be a steady stream of Yearouts coming through Lapway as well, so that'll be fun to keep an eye on. You mentioned Corey Hatch, the coach at North Gem. We've got the quotes in the excellent preview that you wrote, Will. Everybody should go check it out at IdahoSports.com. It's right at the top of the homepage, all our football previews. Here's what he said. We have new guys, but the system will make them effective. We've only passed the ball 69 times in 2 years. This will not change. We intend to run the ball. We will run the ball, and there isn't any reason not to. Until somebody wants to stop the run, we're going to be a force in this league. We will be a tough out for anyone, and it shouldn't surprise anyone if we are contending late in the season to win this league. So I like the confidence there.
The high school that I played for, and granted, this is back, covered wagons and one-room schoolhouses and, no running water and all that jazz. But we ran the old school wishbone. And we had the old cantankerous coach that had been there for a bajillion years. And he was very open with it. Option A is always going to be the fullback right in that center guard gap. And if they're going to give it to us and we go down the field 4 yards at a time, we're going to go down the field 4 yards at a time. We're going to take 6 minutes off the clock, and we're going to score a touchdown, and we're going to put the pressure right back on you. And to a lesser degree, because that's not exactly what North Gem does, it's somewhat the same thing. They're not gonna hit the highlight reel, 95-yard go route up the sideline to the wide receiver. But what they're going to do is they're going to go down the field 8-9 yards at a time, and they're going to wear you down. And over the course of 4 quarters, if you're not in, if you don't have great depth, or if you're not in great shape, all of a sudden those 4-yard runs turn into 7-yard runs, turn into 12-yard runs, turn into gash plays. And that's how you see a lot of those games with teams like a North Gem or like the high school that I went to in Spokane, Gonzaga Prep. It might be 0-0 at the end of the first quarter. It might be 10-7 at halftime. And then all of a sudden you look up at the end of the game and the final score is 31-7, because that style of play can really wear another team down.
Yeah, you were a bullpup. That's interesting to learn.
Gonzaga Prep, the brawny bullpups of the blue and white, and we were full of fight.
That's right. Okay. I'll real quick give my top 5 for the 1AD2 media poll. Kendrick was 1. I had Castleford 2, Rockland 3, Council 4, and Mullen St. Regis 5. I might flip Rockland and Castleford. I'm not decided on that yet, but what do you think of my top 5?
I like the top 5. The only thing I think I would do differently is I would have Dietrich in there somewhere. I don't know if they're 1, 2, or 3. I'd have a hard time convincing myself that they're lower than 5. But as far as the teams that you mentioned, I think once you get beyond Kendrick, I think that there's a puddle of teams. Dietrich being 1, Castleford being 1, Council being 1, Mullen St. Regis being 1. That they're gonna have an opportunity to have their voice heard. They're gonna have a chance to make some noise, and it's just a matter of who does it. It sounds so simple, right? I make it sound so easy. Oh, just go do it. Just go do it. It's not going to be that simple, because they're going to be playing some tough teams. But the team that there are going to be some teams that have the opportunity. It's going to be put in front of them. They're not going to have to rely on somebody else to help them back in. They're going to be able to go in and earn it.
All right, let's preview really quickly what's coming up this week. Of course, the Idaho 8-Man Classic. You can catch all 3 of those games on IdahoSports.com. Will, you're going to be there broadcasting with Paul Kingsbury.
Yep. We're going to be there, and I didn't make it last year, and I will make it this year. And it's some teams that traditionally I don't get to see with my own eyes. I watch a lot of games on Idaho Sports, but living in I live out just outside of Caldwell, having the opportunity to watch with my own eyes Kendrick, Oakley, Clearwater Valley. I'm really, really looking forward to it.
Yeah, the matchups are Kendrick versus Notice, then Clearwater Valley versus Glens Ferry, and finally Prairie versus Oakley. Lapwai was scheduled to play Red River, but they had to drop out. Non-8-man classic games of interest that I see. Rockland is at Camas County. We'll find out, how good the Mushers really are right away. Other ones that are intriguing to me, Tri-Valley at Idaho City. Those are 2 teams you're kind of bullish on, Will. It'll be interesting to see how those 2 shake out. Clark Fork is at Lakeside, first game of this new North Star League up north in the 1AD2 ranks. That'll be interesting. Mullen St. Regis is going to host Superior, which was a juggernaut from Montana last year. I know they want a little revenge. They got shellacked by the Bobcats last year. That'll be interesting.
One game they'll play every year because it's Mullen St. Regis. St. Regis is in Montana.
Right.
They'll play one game a year in St. Regis, and this is the game that's in St. Regis this year.
Yep, definitely. Those are kind of some of the D2 games I've got my eye on in terms of what's going on at the D1 level. Cary at Grace is going to be fantastic. I feel like those are two teams that are going to be fighting for playoff bids throughout the year. Kamiah is at Lapway. So Lapway goes from not playing in the 8-man classic to playing a conference game against Kamiah right out of the gates. That might be the best non-8-man classic game, Kamiah at Lapway. That's
a really good matchup. It's a team with a ton of fantastic athletes, and Kamiah's got plenty of good athletes itself, but they're a team that's going to be able to kind of to bang on you a little bit, that's going to not be as home run-ish, but they're going to single you to death, to use the baseball analogy. And as we talked about with Lapway, man, they've got 2 or 3 kids on that field at any given moment that they can go the distance on any play. That's going to be a really interesting matchup. At Lapway, that field's going to be buzzing. That community, they love their athletes, they support their kids, 100% energy for their sports teams. That one would be a lot of fun. That should be a really interesting football game.
Yeah. So for the full schedule of games, you can go to IdahoSports.com and click on the scoreboard tab. That'll give you all the games that are going on this week. All right. Will, thank you as always for helping us break down. We got through all of the conference previews in about 45 minutes. That's not bad.
Hey, we're better than we look. What can I say?
All right. Well, have fun at the 8-man classic this weekend. We'll have to get your thoughts, obviously, and your analysis of what you saw on next week's edition of the 8-man Prepcast. But until then, thanks for tuning in, everybody. For Will Hoenike, I'm Brandon Baney, and we'll see you next time on IdahoSports.com.